Hello, I'm Ruairí McKiernan, and a very big welcome to the Love and Courage podcast. I'm excited to be bringing you another great episode, this one featuring a wide-ranging conversation with the inspirational Dearbhla Glynn. Originally from County Cork in Ireland, Dearbhla is a multi-award-winning documentary filmmaker, photojournalist, an artist, a writer, and a yoga teacher. Her films explore themes around culture, human rights, and conflict, and her work has seen her travel all over the world, including to conflict zones such as Palestine and Eastern Congo, Iraq. She's worked in Haiti and elsewhere. She's also made films about the Burning Man Festival in the US and the Festival in the Desert in Malai. In recent times, her work has focused a lot more on her yoga practice, her work as a yoga teacher, although at the time of this recording, she wasn't long home from a trip to the Greek island of Lesbos, where people from Afghanistan, Syria and elsewhere remain stranded in search of sanctuary as part of the ongoing global refugee crisis, which really does demand our attention. So our conversation looks at this and so much more. We also delve into her fascinating life path, the journey she's taken, the choices she's made, and the influences in all of that. A large part of that is her family, her parents, and you'll hear a lot more about that soon. I do want to mention that part of Dearbhla's work is involved looking at the theme and the whole area of trauma. It's a difficult part of our conversation. It starts when we start talking about Eastern Congo, and where she talks about the devastating reality surrounding sexual violence in that country. It's about 3/4 way through the podcast. Segment lasts for about 5 or 10 minutes, but you might want to just be aware of that in advance. Overall, Dearbhla's story is one of shining a light in the dark. It's one of truth, it's one of justice, and it's one of hope. It's a one of hope in her own path, but also the path of all those people that she's met and worked with that are surviving in war zones, that are standing up and staying true. And I think it's important to hear that. And in many ways, Dearbhla is a messenger for those stories, just as you two are a messenger. And it's my hope that you will share her voice and the voices that she carries by sharing this episode in particular. So I want to appeal for you to help get the word out there. And with that in mind, I want to thank those that help power the podcast, help get behind it, and in particular recent donors who've just chipped in, helped keep things moving along, help me pay for production and development and marketing costs. Khalil Kyle and Carla McNeil, I want to say huge thanks to you both, and also to Ada Brock in the Netherlands. Ada, I really hope I pronounced your name right. And to Vicky Nash and Davey Ward, who've generously signed up as monthly patrons over at loveandcourage.org. Huge thanks to you, Vicky, and to Davey. I really do appreciate it. And a big thanks, as always, to all the other monthly patrons who continue to chip in, put fuel in the fire. I really, really genuinely do appreciate it. And a special thanks to my friends at AFRI, Action from Ireland, who continue to do amazing work promoting peace, justice and sustainability in Ireland and internationally. Keep an eye out for AFRI's campaigns and events, their Hedge School programme, and also their annual famine walk in Mayo. See afri.ie for more on that. I also want to say a big thanks to my pal Dara Twamley, who recently became a father. Congrats, Dara. Dara helps out with the podcast and production and editing. He's a great musician. He's great on sound production, all that kind of stuff. If you need to get in touch with Dara about any of that, if you need any help in that whole area, you can get him through me. Or if you want to talk to me about sponsoring the podcast, connecting with me around any of my talks, workshops, events, campaigning, consultancy, media or mentoring work, all you need to do is send an email to podcast@loveandcourage.org. Now, I know you want to get stuck into this conversation, so without further ado, let's get started with the conversation, the Love and Courage conversation with Dearbhla Glynn. I hope you enjoy. Dearbhla, it's a wet and wild wintry day on the west coast of Clare here. As I look out the window, the fire's lit behind me. We have 2 warm mugs of tea. And I'd like to begin firstly by saying thanks very much for agreeing to come on the podcast. And then I'm curious as to how you have come to live in these parts. You're the second person that I've interviewed in these parts. The first was Luca Bloom about not too long ago. I've been living here almost a year, and we bump into each other now and then, not too much, but I've never actually got to find out how did you end up here? And usually there's a story behind that. And I'd love to hear what that might be.
Yeah, well, Thanks for having me here. It's nice to have a cup of tea with you and hang out. So I came here over two and a half years ago, and I had been living in Dublin for a long time before that and travelling a lot. And I think a part of me was just really yearning more of the sea, and I had a wonderful opportunity to come and teach yoga and be one of the resident yoga teachers at the Cliffs of Moher retreat. And it's just so spectacularly beautiful down here, and I just really needed to reconnect with nature, the sea, and I think really reconnect with myself also.
Because you've been on the road a lot. Like I was reading through your website and all these countries you've worked in, and are you originally from Dublin?
Cork.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know where I got to Dublin. You did live in Dublin, I think.
Lived in Dublin for a long time, and then I travelled a lot. I mean, I was working a lot in the Middle East and all over Africa, and spent a lot of time in airports, and I kind of felt nobody ever thought I was anywhere. So people were always like, "Oh, you're in Dublin." I'm like, "Yeah, I do actually live here," but because I was traveling so much, no one ever thought I was. And in one way, I was never really anywhere for very long.
Yeah.
You know? So I spent a lot of time traveling and working all over the world, which is amazing. But I really don't enjoy traveling as much now. You know,
okay, so that, do you think that, you know, we'll get to it later because I'm aware that you have been traveling recently as well, but was there a sense of just needing to touch down and ground? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I needed to ground myself, and I had, before I came, I had spent a lot of time in Eastern Congo, and I made 4 films there. 3 smaller ones and 1 feature-length documentary, and I was really kind of a little bit burnt out. I was heading for a serious burnout if I hadn't taken some time. And luckily I always had a yoga and meditation practice, and I think something in me was like, okay, hang on a second, like take a moment now, instead of always feeling I needed to be back in Congo or back in Gaza, or, my heart was so pulled to the people and the places that I had spent time in. But I just really need to take some time for myself, and have less. I felt like there had been a lot of stress in my life, and I needed less stress. So I think coming to the wild west of Ireland in a way was really healing. It was really healing time, and I knew 2 people. I had 2 friends, and so it was a bit of an adventure to kind of up. And I was really nervous because I have so many good friends in Dublin. I had a community of people there, but I just felt I need to do this. I need less of the city now and more of nature.
Do you think part of that's getting a little bit older? Not that you're in any way old as such.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I mean, definitely getting older, and also needing to, maybe make roots somewhere. And I never felt like I love the city and all that the city offers. But I think ultimately I'm more of not a country girl, but I think I needed more of the west, coast of the Atlantic. And the sea, I just love the sea, and for a while, I suppose, driving back into Dublin, I think I felt like, why am I leaving the countryside and going back to the city? It should be the other way around. So
yeah, it tends to be the flow in modern life is that all roads point to the cities almost, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's so much opportunity there, and there's so many great people, there's so much fun, there's so much to do. But yeah, for me, probably time of life as well. Yeah.
And that theme of groundedness and roots, if you can think back to your own beginnings and your own roots, was that Cork City or Cork County?
Yeah, it was. I grew up in Bishopstown, which is a suburb outside of Cork City. But we spent a lot of time in Kerry over the summer. Like we'd go to Kerry down by Doon Queen, Fionnuch, Ballynow, every summer for like 3 months. And my whole family, my dad used to still work. My mum was a teacher, so she could take the 3 months. So I always feel like my really formative, childhood years were in Kerry. I used to just go and hang out with the farmers and just be with the cows and the calves, and and that was for me, that's my strongest childhood memories are down in that part of Ireland, which is so beautiful. And so I feel like I connected to that part of myself when I moved here. It was that part of me that just loved being around donkeys and cows and fields and, being out in nature. So that was, I suppose that was some of my best childhood memories were down there.
What kind of household did you grow up in? What would you say the primary or dominant influences in terms of your thinking, or was it outside in your wider community or teachers?
Yeah, well, my mum and dad are really compassionate people. So they all, like my dad was a guard, my mum was a teacher. My mum was an Irish teacher. They're both really into speaking Irish and their Irish culture, but they both definitely taught me an awful lot about compassion and compassion for others. And so I suppose that was what it was like. We're a very close family. Really, family was very important. Our greater family, uncles, aunts, cousins were all very close. My gran was in our house every day when I grew up, and she lived to be 103, and she was this really remarkable woman that we all adored. And she was just she always used to say, don't want for what you don't have, and I always thought that was nice.
Wow, that's a prolific message to get at any moment in your life. Often we don't learn that till later.
Yeah, and she was, just be happy with what you have and appreciate what you have. Don't take anything for granted,
Yeah. I'm just conscious that there'll be a lot of listeners here from on this podcast from the US and elsewhere. So just to mention that a guard in Ireland is a policeman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just if anyone's wondering what was he guarding?
Yeah.
Was that interesting for you to have a policeman father? Was there any kind of he had 3 daughters, so he was definitely, I have 2 older sisters, so he was very protective of his daughters. But I was the youngest, so I think he was a little bit, and I probably was a little bit more adventurous or a little bit like wilder than my other 2 sisters, so I loved going out. But I was always very sensible. Like I never, and I still never drink much or anything like that, But I just enjoyed like being out and music and dancing and people. And he thought I was kind of streetwise, so he was really easygoing with me actually. You sound like great parents.
Yeah, they are great parents. I'm so grateful to them actually. Yeah.
Wow. And where do you think, apart from the sense of gratitude or compassion, where do you think the social consciousness kicked in around looking at the world at large, or where injustice might be happening? Because that obviously became a bigger theme in your later work.
Yeah, I think I'd say mum and dad, and like my dad was always very sympathetic and empathetic towards travellers. He always, in my primary school, we had some amazing traveller. Can
we also explain what travellers are?
Nomadic. I suppose they're nomadic Irish people. An incredible culture that is not often respected within our Irish settled culture, unfortunately.
Yeah, often comparable somewhat to Indigenous cultures in Australia, the US. Similar challenges, similar issues in some ways.
So my dad used to always say, be just as nice to the traveller children as you would be to any other children, and that was always instilled in us at a very young age. And then I remember when I was growing up, there was these huge famines in Africa, and I remember we all be watching on the news about, it was a time of like Live Aid and that, and being a little kid, and they were, mum and dad would say, like, this is what, it was so awful. It was so awful. And I remember Chernobyl, and my parents would talk to us about what's happening in other parts of the world, and they were like, you have food on your table every evening, like that's, not everyone has that, so I think from an early age, I remember doing posters about, the famine in Ethiopia and different places, Somalia, when I was like a kid. So I think around then.
And so then, as you left school, what was the trajectory from that point forward? Did you decide to take a particular course?
Well, I went to art college and I loved art and I was very creative, and then after I left art college I started to make documentaries, but I wasn't trained to be a filmmaker. I just managed to borrow a camera and just started to make it myself.
Fake it till you make it.
Exactly.
Been there on many occasions.
Yeah. So
and what was your first documentary when you think back to that?
So one of my best friends is Karina Early, who is an amazing Irish artist, painter, and she was going to walk across Spain to do this pilgrimage walk called Santiago de Compostela, which is it's an old ancient pilgrimage to Santiago, and where you walk all along the north of Spain. But she was doing it to inspire her first landscape exhibition. And she was saying, I think even her mother said, why don't you go and film, and bring the camera, borrow a camera. So I managed to borrow like this water damaged camera, and I was like, okay, I'll go with you.
You're like 22?
We were like 21 or 22.
Yeah.
21 maybe. And so we did that. I was carrying a lot of stuff, so it was hard. And people were like, Dearbhla, you're crazy. You're not going to be able to do that. You'll have to have a car or something. But I wanted to experience the journey, and it was really important to me that I did the walking as well. And we all, me, myself, and another friend of ours, Sandra, we did the walk over 34 days, and I filmed the experience. And RT bought that documentary, and it's been screened a lot. It's called Painting for Miles.
That's incredible, just those circumstances all coming together at the moment and place, and even the waterlocked camera.
No, I know.
Because quite often in our endeavours or projects, you kind of want everything to be perfect. And I'll save up for the right camera, the right podcast gear, and then I'll do it.
Yeah.
But you just seize the moment, and then national broadcaster buys your documentary.
Yeah, and it was a lovely documentary, and her paintings were so beautiful. So it was, the beginning of the documentary was this, her embarking on this walk, which was hard. It was like 900 kilometers. And then the end of it was her opening her landscape exhibition of the paintings. So yeah, it was really beautiful. And it was also a great experience with her and my other friends. We were a real little team. We had lots of adventures doing the walk. And I think then I started this kind of experiential filmmaking. So it was like, I suppose I was a part of the experience of the film, if that makes sense.
And do you think that became your kind of cornerstone of your approach? Like that seminal moment informed what was to come then?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the next film was really different, but I think, I felt like for me I had to have an understanding of the experience in order to produce a film or create a film about the experience.
And what was the next occurrence or opportunity that sort of came knocking, or did you go looking for it?
I went looking for it. I really wanted to make a film about the Burning Man festival out in Nevada, and because I suppose I had been to art college and I was so interested in art and community art, and this festival really appealed to me because it was about participation, and it wasn't for a gallery or for the high art world. It was out in the desert for whoever came upon it. And I loved the ethos behind Burning Man, and I really respected Larry Harvey, the founder. And so myself and April Blake raised a little bit of money. April Blake's a producer, to go over there and make a film about Burning Man. So that film was very different, but we made the film over 3 years, over 3 Burning Mans. So it was a really creative, great experience. Yeah.
I get it. I've actually never seen that film. I'm very guilty here because I always kept meaning to track it down somewhere. But I get a real sense of this Irish contingent at Burning Man as well that you were part of. There was a golden era there for a while, wasn't there?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of Irish. I mean, there's a lot of Irish in America, in San Francisco. And I mean, the Irish love a party as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But they were all like, there was incredible Irish artists and carpenters who were out there building these structures and we became friends with David Best, who used to build the temples out there, and then I made a film about David Best alone called The Temple Builder. And yeah, there was incredible communities out there, and I think it was amazing in America that there was this kind of pretty radical festival, but that was based on self-expression and barter system, and wasn't based on money. There was no branding. They decommodified the whole festival. So it was, you know, for me, it was a really interesting time in life.
I'm conscious that Burning Man is still running and still going strong, but I have heard critiques of it that it's kind of jumped the shark and it's become somewhat commercialised. You've got kind of right-wing politicians coming in to party on down, but I also get the sense that its essence is still very strong. Do you know where it's at?
Well, I haven't been, because then I spent so much time in Africa after being in the Nevada desert. I went to the Sahara Desert after that, but I have spoken to people, and the festival is bigger. Sadly, Larry Harvey died last year, but I know that I know the organisers, and they're incredible people with a strong ethic. Like, they're still holding the ethics of what that festival was based on. And yes, there's more people going. There's extremely wealthy people living in San Francisco. So I think a lot of those people are going now, and I've heard of people hiring people to build their art cars, their art structures. So yeah, that has happened. Yeah. It's a bigger experience, but I have heard that it's still, you know, Burning Man are still the biggest funder of the arts in the Bay Area, you know, so they're still funding these great art projects. And I heard that the last burn, as they call it, was amazing. But I haven't been myself since 2005, so a long time.
Ultimately, we do need those kind of wealthy people to have those experiences as well.
Yeah,
you know?
And I think, I know Julianne Goth used to go out, she's this Irish writer, used to go out to the festival in a suit, and he said he was the real estate agent, and he's in our film, and people were like, oh, boo, you know, we hate the real estate agents. And he was like, but shouldn't they be loved just as much as the guy in, you know, a leather thong? You know, why shouldn't you love him? Shouldn't he be included just as
if
much,
love is love.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, I think it's good that it's still happening. I'm glad it's still happening.
Yeah, I spent a little bit of time in the Bay Area, and it definitely has taken a few knocks over the last few years, particularly with Silicon Valley and the influence there. And I see a kind of a common thread in Dublin at the moment, and a lot of us are rent refugees in some ways that have had to leave the city, and big tech has moved in, and, you know, there's a lot of big salaries and all that. And on one hand, nobody wants to deny anybody a job, and we need industry and we need commerce, but the cultural fabric is under a lot of strain at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, and maybe that's an ebb and flow that happens in cities, as cities, you know, maybe it's up to, you know, like Dublin City Council, and in San Francisco maybe it's up to like the politicians to make sure that the culture is preserved and stays, and that the artists aren't pushed out of the city.
Yeah, to hold the balance somewhere. Yeah,
and I mean, yes, we're seeing that happen in Dublin. A lot of people are leaving the city because they cannot afford to live there, or there's no space to put on the like the Christmas flea market, or all these, you're hearing of all these studios shutting down, just apartments and hotels being built. And yeah, I don't know what to say. Maybe that is maybe this is a natural ebb and flow. It doesn't happen in all cities. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I choose to not be around that personally. You know? Yeah,
I also wonder, there's absolutely no doubt that it's inflicting a lot of worry, stress, strain, suffering. I also think that it may be informing some sorts of rural revivals, although the rent challenges are moving rural as well.
Yeah.
But like, a lot of small towns need young energy, and
that's what I love about here, because, you know, we have moved down to Lahinch and Estaim and Scanner, and yes, a lot of people are being pushed out of the cities, but then look, there's these towns where there's a lot of vibrancy flooding in again, and I think that's great. So there's a plus to that, you know. And I mean, look at Estaim and how it's changed dramatically and changing in the last few years. Yeah,
Estaim, near where we are right now, is a little bit of a poster child rural.
Yeah.
I get the sense that it was a very traditional Irish farming market town. It took a few hard knocks during recession and so on, but then there was always this kind of Burren alternative hippie scene, and then you've got your artists around that, you've got your foodies, and then of course Clare is synonymous with music, and then we just happened to surfing nearby in the Hinch. So it's a real perfect amalgamation of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great that people are moving over to the west of Ireland. I mean, it's so incredible and beautiful, and it seems, I hope that flow continues. And it's always good when not everything is centralised in the cities.
It is, yeah. If we could just get some broadband improvements, some public transport, because they're we can be in danger of glorifying it too much sometimes, or at least I have talked to people that want to move here and throw everything away, and it's not. I haven't found it that straightforward. Like there are challenges as well, but
of course.
on balance, I think there's more wins. But again, it so much depends on your circumstances, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and I think if you need a job or you need to be in the city, then of course you can't. But if you're kind of thinking, okay, I want to make a change, I think there's a lot of potential to create things down here. There's more opportunities in a way.
Yeah, it suits certainly like people in arts and culture and self-employed people are used to kind of having to figure it out anyway. So you might as well try and figure it out from here as anywhere else.
So, and we're a small country, so it's not that far.
Yeah, it is for sure. Like I've definitely got up really early in the morning and could be in Dublin for a 10 a.m. meeting or whatever. Yeah. So it is doable. Yeah, and I think the more you travel abroad, you really get that perspective that Ireland is very, very small.
Small and amazing.
yeah, well that's the thing, because it can be like if you talk to an Australian or American, quite often that haven't been here, you can say, well, you can drive from coast to coast in 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
And they might think that's crazy, but there's such a world of diversity within those 3 hours that you could spend months within pockets of those.
Yeah, little nooks.
Get lost in Longford for a year. Make a documentary. Maybe Lost in Longford. Hey, everyone knocks Longford. It's not fair. Longford is still,
I love Longford.
Longford will become hip one of these days, and we'll be quoting this moment. So tell me then, from Burning Man, where did things evolve from there for you in terms of your work and your creativity?
So after Burning Man, which was a great time, but I really felt like I was being drawn to Africa. And I heard the CD called Festival au Désert, and there was this festival in the Sahara Desert that Robert Plant had played at, and Damon Albarn was going, and it was this Tuareg festival. And I heard the CD. I think I might have been even in Burning Man at the time, and I was like, I'm going there. Whatever that is, it just sounded so incredible, and the Tuareg music was just so hypnotic. It's like this bluesy, African, magical, trippy, bluesy desert music. And so then I started planning going out there, and I met Liam and Wayne Lee in the desert, funny enough, in Nevada.
Did you bump into him?
Yeah, well, I was kind of beside this kind of impromptu kind of drum circle that, of course, Liam was in the middle of.
Yeah, so Liam O'Mahony's this kind of, well, I suppose he is a veteran Irish musician at this point, but he is the kind of guy that just appears like a vision.
Yeah, and he's this incredible musician who can pick up any instrument and play it, and pick up any tune. And so I spoke to him about the festival, and he was like, oh, that sounds interesting, I'd like to go there. And then I was planning my way over to Malai to go to this festival, and I met Liam again, and we spoke about it again, and he was like, oh, I was saying, I'm thinking I might like to make a film over there, and he was saying, I'm definitely interested. And it was funny because we kind of bumped into each other a few times without planning it, and it just felt like it was meant to be. I went to the festival the first time, and we just landed, and well, it was a real journey getting there. It was another adventure getting up to Timbuktu and going out to this festival, and it just completely blew me away. It was very much a Tuareg festival with hundreds of Tuaregs and camels, and there were some European Western people there, Damon Albarn was playing that year, but everyone was talking about Malian music. It was the time Ali Farka Touré and Talking Timbuktu, and so for me, I was like, whatever this is, I'm coming back with a film. I'm going to make a film here, and I wanted to bring back Irish musicians. And when I was in Timbuktu after the festival, I heard what sounded like Irish music, but it was a traditional fiddle, like a one-string fiddle, but the rhythm sounded quite like Irish music. And so when I went back, I was really determined, okay, maybe Liam would come back with me, and I really wanted to bring a piper, a traveller. I really wanted to bring a traveller who, as we said, was one of our nomadic people, and to bring over the pipes to the desert, I thought would be really amazing. Because it's just, the sound over there is incredible, the dunes and the cacophony.
So you started visualising and imagining the sound you wanted to bring to the desert. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the visual.
No, well, I mean, I love music, even though I'm not a musician. I'm around a lot of musicians, and it's just so hypnotic to me. That place, there was something about Mali, it just got under my skin, and I was going to go back as soon as I could. So we managed to get a little bit of money to go back, and Vanessa Gilday came on board as a producer, and it was Liam who said to me, okay, if you want to bring a traveller, a piper, you got to bring Paddy Keenan. And Paddy Keenan is this incredible piper, one of the best in the world, but he was kind of hard to find. I was like, okay, how am I going to
Love it.
this? Yeah.
He had to be hard to find.
Yeah, of course. But then I met him, I happened to bump into him in the Czech Republic at this kind of film music festival. And I was like, oh my God, you're Paddy Keenan. I was like, I really want to bring you out to the desert, to this festival in Mali. And if Paddy is like, okay, I'll go. He was up for anything, you know. And
there's no big chat about like
no,
the
it was
logistics.
it was all very, fluid.
And
it all felt like it was really meant to be. So we managed to get a little bit of money together to go out the first time, and it was me, Liam, and Paddy, and Vanessa, and we just landed out in Mali, and they collaborated with other musicians, and they went on this musical journey through Mali, and Mali is seen as the home of the blues. It's like a lot of people say it's the heart of Africa. If you look at Africa and you look at Mali, it's like the cultural heart. People would refer to Mali in that way. And it was incredible. They collaborated with Afel Bokoum and his band in Bamako. They met Timani Diabate, and then we journeyed up to Dogon country, and they made their way and they performed at this festival and blew everyone away with their music, and we filmed the whole journey. So it was like a journey into the heart of Africa, and we made this amazing film that we all, I think, are very proud of. It was a hard process. We made it again over 3 years, and we did 2 trips to the festival, and then the first time we screened the film, we managed to get a little bit of money to go back to Mali, and the first screening of the film was in Bamako and Timbuktu and Niafunke. So that was amazing. Yeah. So,
incredible.
Yeah.
So it sounds like in so much of this you're in many ways following your nose and following the vibe.
Yeah.
You talked about coincidences a couple of times. Is that like your primary way of finding your way forward? Is it?
Yeah, well, I think it's synchronicity, and I think there's something in that. And sometimes I feel you can really push. Like before, I've really pushed for projects, and they haven't. I feel like I'm pushing against the door that won't open. And if I feel that, I'm like, okay, well, just stop pushing. Maybe it's not meant to happen. But if something feels like it's kind of flowing, or I definitely, my heart is on my sleeve, and I definitely follow my heart and my passion. And that's how I tend to live life, I think. And with those projects, that I've definitely followed my heart, and it's just kind of, there's been a fluidity to it, or it's just kind of flowed, and it just felt right.
Would I be right in guessing that it hasn't all been as flowy as it sounds, in the sense that choosing a life of the arts and creativity and adventure and kind of creating work around issues brings its own shit, frankly.
Yeah, well, it's not very practical anyway, for starters. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like, I mean, I don't own a house. You know, didn't say, okay, I'm going to spend the next 5 years earning money to pay for, you know, a down payment for a house. So I didn't make those decisions, you know. But yeah, and of course it was hard. You're always hustling for funding.
It's month to month kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then once you make the film, you got to get the film out there. You got to be kind of savvy. I'm definitely not a business person, you know. So yeah, of course it's hard. It's hard to make a living and to sustain yourself. But somehow it always worked out. And you know, even I did some projects that were more for, you know, it was more like a job. But even those projects I was really passionate about, and I was lucky to collaborate with some great NGOs or make some rights-based films I really believed in.
So you never got this sense that you want to just jacket that the hustle was too much and I just need to go and get what some people might call a real job? Or
Yeah, no, I've done like, I mean, I did lecture for a year. I did have a real job for a year. My parents were delighted for that.
Well, yeah, we need to question what a real job is, but what was the lecturing?
I lectured in Limerick Art College for a year in film and photography.
And how was that for you to do?
Well, it was also really creative because I was in the art college, which I actually went to, and I got to meet some great students that were really, you know, great to work with. And I had a couple of fantastic colleagues that I loved, and so that was creative in a different way. But I was a little bit, you know, I couldn't just go away if I needed to go away.
Yeah,
you know?
Of course, yeah.
But then I wasn't, you know, for my own work and my own filming, I did need to travel a bit, so it was a little bit restrictive, I suppose, in that way.
And why didn't you stay any longer than a year? Was that itchy feet? Was that temporary contract?
It was temporary contract, and I kind of felt I could go down that academic road, or I was also at the same time being offered this you know, road into teaching full time in a retreat centre, and that was also, I suppose, that world felt like I think I want to be more in this world, if that makes sense.
Okay, so your two worlds were starting to merge and not necessarily collide, but certainly crossroads.
Well, I think that road, I mean, yoga for me is so important, and it's not just the physical practice of yoga. It's like the whole ethos around yoga means so much to me, and it's helped me so much in my life that I think I was drawn into being in that place, and also living over here, you know.
Do you have a sense that is almost like choosing a more inward journey than an outward journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think...
So it's still exploration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I meet amazing people, and it's deep work, you know.
I predicted a yoga documentary, and it's not coming soon. Is there anything like that happening?
You know, I'm really interested in trauma and the body.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, because after Malai, I suppose the work that I did led me a lot to think about trauma and how trauma impacts people, and
these are
stress and anxiety.
Particularly in war zones. You spent a fair bit of time in Gaza, Haiti, Congo.
Yeah, particularly, I mean, Iraq as well, but particularly, I suppose, Palestine and Gaza and Eastern Congo. So, and even, you know, I was in Liberia after the Ebola crisis. You know, it was incredible work, meeting incredible people, but it was definitely high stress, fight or flight kind of stuff. And then you're also meeting people who have either witnessed atrocities or physically experienced them. So I think, you know, I really pulled from my own yoga practice and my own practice to give me strength and keep me grounded and give me resilience. And I suppose now I'm at a place where I'm like, okay, well, how can we bring the practice to people who are living in active conflict, or who have experienced it, or who work in it, you know. I think I'm going way ahead now, jumping way ahead.
No, it's all joining up. I remember reading a little bit of your work in Congo, and it was particularly around, I mean, first of all, I feel that, like, what way do you refer to Congo? Some people say DR Congo or Democratic Republic Congo.
The Democratic Republic of Congo, but I always say Eastern Congo.
Okay,
Eastern DRC, I suppose.
And like, a lot of your work seemed to be around gender and violence, am I right? So it's I suppose what comes to mind is that Eastern Congo in particular is not a place you read about or hear about a lot, and in that part of the world tens of millions of people have died in the last 30 years. And we think about the conflict in Ireland recent times, we had 3,000 deaths and it's been atrocious. And then in other places there's tens of millions, and mining for mobile phones. And I do remember clearly reading about the cobalt being mined that was going into smartphones and thinking, is the direct line of complicity there? And then obviously women being such a major portion of the victims of what was going on there. So you're right in a lion's den of modern conflict and trauma.
Yeah, I mean, I did a master's in development in Kimmage Development College, which was an amazing experience, and I read a lot of research around Eastern Congo and the conflict there. And at that time, in 2010, 2011, Goma, which is the capital of Eastern Congo, was called the rape capital of the world, which is a very sensational title to give a city. But I was reading about these alarming, extremely violent reports of rape coming out of Eastern Congo. And I was like, what is happening to the men? What has happened to society that this is happening? So I was just really curious to find out what was happening in Eastern Congo. So I put together a little proposal saying I really wanted to go to talk to the perpetrators of rape in Eastern Congo, and I managed to get some funding. So I also wanted to talk to the survivors, but I wanted to really talk to the men around what had happened to them, that they were carrying out this rape, you know. I don't believe a child is born evil. Okay, so that's my own belief. So I managed to get some money. Everyone was like, Dearbhla, I don't think you should do this. It sounds a bit crazy, you know, but I was able to access, I had amazing access. I found, again, I had one contact through Joe Murray, actually, from AFRI. I had one contact for this incredible man called Ilo Muthaka. And he was running a very grassroots little local NGO called Congo Men's Network, and they were educating men around sexual violence. So I just met him, and that contact just worked out really well. We became friends. We collaborated together on several projects, and they were running these trainings for men who really wanted to learn about. They wanted to be educated around sexual violence. And there has been conflict there for so long. A lot of people are not educated. And also education is privatized, so you have to have money to send your kids to school. So it was a really interesting project that drew me into Eastern Congo for 4 or 5 years. I was going there. And I made a short film initially, and that film won the ICCL Human Rights Film Award, and I was able to get some more funding to go back to make a feature documentary. And it was a real labour of love as well, and I met incredible people. It was a really hard time, I think, in my life, because I ended up being in regions that were, I was in Beni when this whole massacre started, and I was the only photojournalist or a filmmaker who was there, who was able to document what was happening. And then, of course, you feel, okay, I have to go out and document as much as I can. And literally every day, people were being killed with machetes. And in, Eastern Congo is so huge that you don't necessarily know what's happening in different regions. And there's so much conflict there in so many different parts. There's conflict wherever there are, gold mines. There's so many different rebel groups. It's alarming. It's hard to even get your head around the conflict in Congo and how nuanced it is, and nothing is black and white. So it was hard to make those films because I really wanted to bring awareness to what was happening there. And so many people said to me, Dearbhla, just help get our stories out there. So you feel a responsibility. You know, people have given you their stories. But it was an incredible experience, and the people are really phenomenal. It was very inspiring, even though it was also very hard.
It sounds like you intentionally went face to face with the darkness.
Yeah. Well, it was, you know, I didn't find the darkness in the perpetrators, and I interviewed, I'd say, over 60 or 70 perpetrators. The darkness was actually in those who had power. I walked into this bar, this kind of bar / restaurant one evening, and it was all these high-ranking generals who were there, and I went with my fixer. He knew one of the generals. That's how we managed to get in, and there was such a darkness there. Actually, those men they were involved with some of these massacres, and they definitely had no compassion for the people who were being killed. And that was quite a strange experience, because I managed to get access. You know, I was able to go into the front lines with one of these generals, who I knew, who was okay with me. I think because I was a woman, he didn't take me that seriously, and he was enjoying being photographed and filmed. So there was probably a bit of ego kicking in there, but I followed him quite a bit in Benny, and since then it's been proven that he was actually involved and complicit with some of these really horrendous attacks that were happening.
I'm imagining that you could almost feel the darkness of these people, that it was fairly deep. And
it's a strange experience, but I was with I had an amazing local fixer who worked with me, and the two of us were like, we left, and we were like, it was also, I had incredible access. You know, I always managed to get good access. And these people, a lot of them would not want a journalist around, you know. So particularly this general, he never had journalists follow him. He was very close to the ex-president, Joseph Kabila, who is extremely corrupt. It's a funny thing, because it makes you question humanity and what man can do to man, and it's so awful what happens over there and in regions where there is corruption and people can get away with what they're getting away with.
Has anyone challenged you on the idea that these perpetrators aren't the fundamental culprits, in that if they're inflicting sex crimes or other crimes, that ultimately their own personal agency has to at some point deem them to be responsible? You know, obviously they're in a command and control structure, but how do you navigate all that?
I remember one time meeting with ELO we were in a camp for displaced people, and literally he had rounded up around 20 men who all were saying they had committed acts of sexual violence, and they were waiting. You know, they were open to talking about it, and this was in 2012, 2013. And after that, they became less open. You know, in the years after that, there was a very famous rape trial in Minova, and the FRDC, which is the army commanders, were telling their soldiers, don't be talking to journalists. So since after that, they would have been less open. And these were mostly ex-rebels, so they had been rebel soldiers. Many of them were soldiers at the age of 10, 11 and 12. And they were either they decided to join, or they were recruited, or they were forced to join. So at that age, you're still developing a moral conscience, you know. Maybe your family are dead. Who knows what you've experienced. So I don't think, you know, many of them showed remorse, and some of them I felt were very, very disconnected from themselves, and they were just in this cycle of violence. I met one man he was young. He was maybe like 19 now. At the time I interviewed him, and he told me he'd raped maybe over 50 women, and, you know, including gang rape, mutilation, killing people. And he just said, you know, we were living a life of hell, and some of us felt like we were dead already. So they didn't have any conscience, you know. And I don't think, coming from my having this lovely childhood and this lovely, you know, loving family, I can judge this person. You know, who am I to judge them? I don't know what it's like. I don't know what their upbringing is like. Of course, you think that everyone knows when they take a woman by force that or when they commit acts of violence, like how wrong it is. But I don't know if we know what it's like to be a child soldier. And often the commander is like a father figure, and they want to please him. So they might rape a girl or a young woman, and bring her then to their commander for him to rape her also, you know. So it's so complicated, and I don't think anything is really black and white, you know. I don't know if they made this choice of, yes, I'm going to commit this act of violence as coming from a very healthy place, you know. I think they're coming from a place of sadness and loss and desperation, and the amount of child soldiers is just awful over there, you know. And some of them never form a moral conscience, or end up being very traumatized young men who are never going to function properly. And then you have to look at the breakdown of society, like what happens in conflict. Like communities are torn apart, you know, people become displaced, they lose connection with their families, they're desperately lonely, they're hungry, there's illness. It's so awful for communities and society. It's like, this is what happens then, you know. And I believe a lot of the men who were rebel soldiers were part of a cycle of violence that had been going on for generations. And it's not saying that they're not to blame. I think what they did is awful, but it's equally sad what's happened to them. It's maybe not equally sad, but it's definitely sad. Their lives are extremely sad also.
And obviously it goes without saying that the female population of the country has been brutalized beyond belief.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I met some incredible women. I interviewed more survivors than I did perpetrators, and they were incredible. What they experienced was horrendous. It was also that sense that they lost their value, you know. And the first film I made was called The Value of Women in Eastern Congo, because if you had been raped, then you were seen as soiled goods. You know, who would want to marry a woman who had been raped? And if she became pregnant, you know, who would want that child? And that was another issue. These unwanted children born from rape, with the face of a, you know, say if it was a Rwandan, you know, Tutsi rebel group who had a Tutsi face, you know, it was awful. But there was incredible women. Like, I spent a lot of time with Mama Massacre, who ran the safe house for women, and for women who had become pregnant from rape. And she also mediated with the husbands of women who had been raped, and trying to encourage the men to take her back. Like, this was the thing, if you were raped, often these women were kicked out of the homes, you know. I met a young girl who was 16, and she was raped by 3 men in Minova. And when she went home to tell her mother was furious. And at first I didn't understand. I was like, obviously she was furious with the men, but she was furious with her, because she was like, why didn't you run? You know, and the mother didn't talk to her then, and she was pregnant. She was pregnant when I met her. So it was so, I mean, of course, you know, you meet these women, it was horrendous what they had experienced. And then, of course, you're very angry that the men were carrying out this rape. But often the men that raped them were these soldiers, so they were FARDC soldiers, or they were Kabila's private army soldiers. It wasn't the rebels that were coming in, you know. So, and then a lot of men said, well, I saw the soldier raping, so I said, well, maybe, you know, why don't I rape also, you know? So complex.
So it's a society, as you mentioned, it's broke down.
Yeah.
It's complete, we almost have no understanding in our sort of privileged
It's
country.
hard to relate.
Obviously, there's no shortage of brutality and injustice that has gone on in our own countries as well, but on that scale, it's staggering, really.
Yeah, and I think we don't know what it's like to grow up and never have any sense of security and have witnessed or experienced violence like on that level. So it was these films, they're so depressing and hard to watch. But I think it was important to me that I made a film to show what was happening and to try and raise awareness to what
tell their
happening.
stories.
Yeah, to tell their stories. But they were, very hard-hitting films. So, after that I was like, okay, the next film I make has to be really positive. And I also want to make a positive film about how incredibly resilient people are in Congo and Gaza and different regions. Like, people are incredible what they overcome, and I think we can learn so much from them.
Can you talk to me about, because as we speak, there's further atrocities in Gaza, which is at this stage it's daily, really. Can you talk to me a little bit about your experiences there?
Well, I went to Gaza. I was asked to go on this flotilla, actually. This ship was trying to break the siege, which has been imposed in Gaza since 2009, I believe, or maybe 2008.
Is that the one, there's a former Irish rugby player, Trevor Hogan, was on one of the boats?
Possibly.
There was several boats.
Yeah, there were several. Yeah. This one was attacked. It was attacked.
There was one where there was Israeli militia,
and 19 people were killed. Yeah. And I am not a big boat person, and Cuiva Butterley was involved in it, and the dates were changed when it was meant to go, and I decided, okay, I'm just going to go myself. And I heard I wanted to go. I was reading about offensives in Gaza, and again I was like, what is going on over there? I was like, I really want to go. I really want to go into Gaza. And then when somebody asked me, would I go on the flotilla, I just thought, well, why don't I just go through Egypt and go in over land? And I heard about Ruairí McKiernan, who's this great Galway activist, and she was raising money to bring money over to support the hospitals, like medical aid, and also to support the children in Gaza. So I contacted her and said, are you going? Like, I'd like to go, and maybe I could film you over there and make a documentary about what's happening in Gaza and following her. And I approached TG Cahar about making this documentary. So the first film I made was following Trasa in Gaza. It took me 2 months to get in to Gaza. I spent a month in Egypt trying to get in, and then I left and went home, and eventually I was managed to get in through Rafah. It's very hard to gain entry to Gaza, and it's still hard.
It's often referred to as the world's biggest open prison.
Well, that's what it feels like, and a lot of Gazans haven't left for many, many years, or they're not allowed to leave, and because of the siege, the borders are closed. And nowadays it's hard to go in through Egypt because the Sinai Desert is very unsafe. And the last time I went into Gaza through Egypt, my cameras were confiscated in Cairo airport, and it's so complicated in Egypt now also. But Gaza for me was an incredible experience also, in that the people are just so wonderful over there, and what they're enduring, it feels like slow drip genocide, actually, and the impact of these offensives for you have to remember that Gaza is a tiny piece of land. At its longest, it's 40 kilometers long, So there's over 2 million people living there now. I think it's the densest population in the world.
Food shortages, electricity.
Food shortages, no electricity. The electricity's cut, so suddenly the hospitals have to switch to generators. So babies die in neonatal wards. People are dying completely unnecessarily from illnesses that we would never die from here. There's malnutrition. There's a huge amount of depression. There's reports that 1 in 5 children are chronically depressed in Gaza because they witness so much. So I was really lucky that I collaborated with PCHR, which is the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, I initially made this first film with Trasa, but then I went back several times to document different offensives that were going on. And initially I made a short film, actually, which won the ICCL awards also. And that was just an awareness raising film about the Operation Cast-led offensive. And that film, because I think it's a short film, people will be able to watch it, and it was trying to give some sense to what it's like inside Gaza. And I think, you know, at that time when I first entered, when I entered through Rafah, just outside the border, there was this huge football pitch, and all of this aid had been sent to Gaza from all around the world to support, you know, to warm clothes, food, medical supplies, and none of it was allowed in because of the siege. So all of it was just there, stuck in this football pitch. And then literally Gaza was like a kilometre away, and when everything that gets into Gaza still is going in through these tunnels. So all the cement, all the, you know, the fresh food, you know, it's unbelievable to try and get your head around.
And next door is a very wealthy,
thriving, yeah, beautiful,
booming, westernized.
Yeah. I mean, that's the bizarre thing is you can see the beautiful fields of Israel, and then there's a fence, and then the other side is like the bomb site of also beautiful Gaza, you know, which was this incredible place, it must have been paradise once, covered with olive trees and jasmine flowers and lemon trees, orange trees, everything grew in Gaza, you know. But it's extremely sad. I can't believe it's still happening, actually. But it is, unfortunately. It's a very complex conflict, very different to Congo, extremely geopolitical. But I think, you know, when we look at the Geneva Convention, it's geopolitical. I mean, the rules obviously don't apply to Israel, and they seem to be able to do whatever they want to do. And I think that the world is very sympathetic to what's happening in Gaza, and I also think it's very sad for Israel. I think the IDF are an army that the whole country, you know, you're conscripted, you have to join the army. And I've spoken to soldiers who have gone through horrors, you know, being an IDF soldier. They've been sleep deprived, manipulated, forced to do acts they would never do with a clear conscience, you know. And I've spoken to soldiers who've cried, and I think there's an incredible group called Breaking the Silence, and I think that that's the root of real change, because they so far have thousands of testimonies where soldiers have given these testimonies after they finished their conscription about feeling so guilty about what they did. But the whole country is a part of it then. They're all part of this army. So, and then they suffer a lot of trauma, you know, they're also traumatized. But I still think what's happening is wrong. I think I'm hoping at one point we'll look back on it and it'll be one of the great shames of society that it continued for so long.
So I can see your clear link now with trauma and yoga, and you know, a lot of people, well, not a lot necessarily, but some people would see yoga from a particular viewpoint that might be simply around well-being, exercise, relaxation, you know, but I'm guessing that you see it as way more profound than that.
Yeah, well, it's definitely, I mean, when I think I spoke, you know, when I was working in Congo or Gaza, and, you know, it was challenging work for lots of different reasons, but my yoga practice gave me great strength, it grounded me. Yoga really helps me to unwind, de-stress. If I'm feeling anxious, it really helps me, you know, yoga and meditation helps me to alleviate any anxiety. So I love passing this on, whatever I have learned, to people. And I think a lot of people suffer from stress and anxiety in our society, let alone those living in active conflict. So I see, I work in a very beautiful yoga retreat, which is a real honor, and I get to, I do beautiful, slow flow vinyasa practice, but we also do a lot of yin and restorative yoga and silent walks and breath work and meditation. And I see how this really helps to calm people, to help people just let go of any stress. And I have done this in Congo and a little in Gaza, and I just came back from Lesbos, where I was also doing some of this work over there, which was for me, a dream. And it's where I want to do a lot more work now with people who can't access.
And Lesbos is very much at the heart of the refugee crisis in the Mediterranean at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you want to just, we could speak at length about Lesbos and the refugee crisis and what's going on there in the Mediterranean alone at length. I feel like we need to do another podcast here. I want to stick with the yoga thread for just another minute, if you don't mind. Well, first of all, let's give a plug to where you work, because I don't think you mentioned it. Because it's a very unique place, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a beautiful. So I'm one of the resident teachers in the Cliffs of Moher retreat in Clare, in the Scanner, and it's a beautiful retreat which has a huge studio that overlooks the sea, and just that part of the world. I love that. I love the walks around Clahan and walking up to the Cliffs of Moher. So I teach there. I feel lucky that I teach in such a beautiful place.
What's that like, that contrast of coming back? So a couple of weeks ago, if I'm not wrong, you were in Lesbos, you were meeting people that had presumably come from perhaps a mix of sub-Saharan Africa and Syria, Afghanistan. Some of them arrived in dinghies, some of them been through all sorts of trauma. And then you're kind of jumping between these quite different worlds, and you're in the west of Ireland 2 weeks later or whatever. How do you, have you learned over many years now to navigate those different realities?
Yeah, well, actually, for me, I think it would have been harder coming back from Gaza just after an offensive into Christmas Day or something, where suddenly it's like, oh, my gorgeous nieces and my nephew with all these, presents, and it's like all the abundance we have, and I suppose the phenomenal luxury we have in our society, where we can celebrate Christmas and be with our family and feel safe and give each other presents, and that was a bit more of a juxtaposition.
Celebrate a Palestinian. Wasn't Jesus born in?
Yeah, apparently. So I don't. In a way, it's the same work. If going into the retreat, and I came straight back from Lesbos to go straight back into the retreat center. But it's such a beautiful, calming space, and I have a real spiritual connection to the retreat, and the people that come there. In a way, they're seeking the same thing, they're coming to do meditation and yoga, so it's similar work, it's just a different landscape.
I think ultimately we're all seeking the same thing, whether we know it or not, which is peace and harmony, and
of course.
Find a place of belonging and purpose.
For me, in Lesbos we met there was such inspiration there. We met people who, I don't know how they've even survived what they've survived, yet we're sitting around drinking tea, laughing and joking, and it's that incredible strength and resilience, and we're all connected in a way. So just to listen to people's stories and for them to feel heard sometimes is such a privilege. It's so simple, but that's all it comes down to sometimes,
Yeah, because it can seem very overwhelming as to how we can respond. Sometimes one of the biggest things we can do is just listen with our two ears.
Yeah, and people have said to me, I don't know what to do, what can we do? And I have thought, well, what can I do? Should I film, or, will I do yoga meditation? That seems a little bit kind of surface level when people don't have any food, so but I think sometimes it is just listening. And I know from being in Congo and Gaza and Iraq and different places where such hardship has been endured. And people often say, sometimes just feeling less isolated. And people said that to us in Moria camp in Lesbos. When people come, we feel less isolated and we feel that people care.
Yeah, it feels almost seen as humans.
Yeah, seen as humans.
Do you want to finish up by telling me a little bit about hot tubs? Slight change of... seaweed baths. Seaweed baths, yeah. Not quite hot, not quite rock and roll hot tubs.
No, my lovely boyfriend, Owen, moved to Clare over a year ago now, and he started doing seaweed baths along the west coast of Ireland, and he set up a little company called Wild Atlantic Seaweed Baths. And he's always wanted to do seaweed baths, but to do them in beautiful places and to bring people to these beautiful places where they sit in a whiskey barrel with hot seawater and seaweed, which is really good for you. And the seaweed, we could do a whole podcast on seaweed. It's so good for you for so many different reasons. And so he's been doing that every weekend. He goes to Clare and he's just going to Galway next weekend, and he goes all over West Cork and Kerry, and it's this magical thing.
I've seen people in them. I haven't done it yet. I can't believe I haven't. But I've seen people in Clahan, and there's a real sense of almost like a children's playground.
Yeah.
Everyone seems really giddy that they're sitting in these barrels.
Well, it is because you feel really good.
Yeah.
And you feel really good. And people are always surprised that it's hot water, but he has devised this heating system where you can heat up. And the lovely thing is he heats up the hot seawater, and then the water just goes back into the sea. And the seaweed is used for compost. So it's really sustainable. And I think people just love the experience and to be outdoors, and it could be like this windy, cold, freezing cold, wet evening, and you're getting into this whiskey barrel, and it's just really novel, and there's great crack, and it's all locals that come, and people love it and they feel good afterwards, and it's just a really magical experience that he's created.
Love it. It's another great example of possibility and imagination, and that he dreamt this up somehow, he followed it and made it happen.
And probably influenced by the Busca Baja, by Shirley, who's been doing this mobile sauna for the last 8 or 9 years now, going to beautiful places and warming up our cold winter bones and making us feel good. And these are all old traditions. So it's reviving these old traditions, and it's not about going to the pub on a Sunday. It's like, come on, let's go and have a seaweed bath.
Let's go jump in a whiskey
and go swimming in the sea, or
love it. And there's a definite sense of community and fun around here where people seem to want to gather and play and
jump in the ocean.
And I think, all things considered, when we talk about the traumas and atrocities and hardships, that it's about celebrating what we do have as well, which brings us back to your folks and that sense of gratitude.
I've been grateful for what you have. We live in a safe country, and I know we have our issues, but we have great people around us. There's great and I love West Clare for this incredible community, and this community, the support. People are really connected with the land, with each other. People just love jumping in the sea every day. There's a lot of vibrancy around, and I like being in the middle of that somehow.
Long may it continue. Thanks so much, Dearbhla. It's been an absolute pleasure. I could talk to you all day and do 10 episodes. We could do a whole series on you, but we'll leave it at that for now. Thank you. Hello, Ruairí here again. Before you go, can you please consider sharing this episode with friends, family, social media contacts, or anyone you think might be interested? Also, be sure to check out the Love and Courage podcast archive, subscribe, rate, review, all that kind of stuff. If you don't mind, I'd really appreciate it. And please consider becoming a patron or a once-off donor over at loveandcourage.org. Even if it's €5 or $5, it really is appreciated. As always, feel free to contact me at podcast@loveandcourage.org. That's podcast@loveandcourage.org. You can find me, Ruairí McKiernan, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those kind of places. So that's it, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of the Love and Courage community at a time where we need to be bolder and braver in standing up, speaking out, and shining our own light in the world. A world of love and courage. Thank you all.